Hello again everybody. This week's video is a little bit of a mishmash, so I'm going to apologise up front because other commitments have prevented me from being out and about with my camera, and rather than just not bother doing a video at all, I thought I'd tidy up a couple of points that I wanted to cover and also tell you a funny story. So if the thought of that already bores you to tears, then press the stop button now and move on. But I think it's a fairly funny story anyway. Point number one. One of my viewers who watched the video where I compared and contrasted the Olympus EM10 to the EM1, a gentleman by the name of Tony Robinson, very kindly left me a very constructive comment telling me that if I were to upgrade the firmware on my Mark 1 version of the EM1, it would then mean that I can do focus stacking in camera. Brilliant. I have now done it, but I have to say that upgrading the firmware when you're using an Apple Mac Mini with the M1 chip in it isn't as straightforward as Olympus would have you believe. They're a little bit unclear in their complete description. But anyway, I got to the bottom of it. I have now installed, I think it's version 4.6, and I'm looking forward to being able to do some focus stacking. Eagle-eyed viewers will notice that I have bought an L bracket for the camera. I don't often use a tripod, but I figured that for focus stacking then it's probably going to be advisable that sometimes at least I do have the thing mounted on a tripod, and I'd rather use an L bracket rather than just use the tripod bush on the base of the camera. So there we go. I now have an L bracket. Even that's not totally true because I've got more than one L bracket. I've got two L brackets. Like the dipstick that I am, I ordered this one by mistake. This is actually an L bracket for the Mark II version of the EM1, and it is just a slight different profile to the Mark I, so it won't quite fit, and I've decided to give it away. The first ever giveaway on Photography for Enjoyment. So if anybody out there has got the need of an L bracket for a Mark II Olympus EM1, let me know. Either leave a comment down below, or you can find my email address somewhere on the channel. I know it's there. Drop me a line and I'll get it posted to you, because otherwise it's just going to gather dust. Item number 3, it's not an unboxing video, but I'm going to show you a very nondescript white cardboard box with a rattle. It contains yet another manual adapter. It's micro 4/3, but this time it's to the original Olympus film era Zuiko lenses, and I've bought this specifically to go with an item that hasn't yet arrived, which is annoying me, but there you go. It's another manual focus lens that I'm going to put on here for a video which will be coming up in certainly the next couple of weeks, if not next week. So watch this space. One other thing I'd just like to mention, if anybody is looking for cheap and very comprehensive books on photography, you do a lot worse than trying to find one of these. It's called Basic Photography by Michael Langford. My copy I've had since 1974. The title's a bit misleading. It should really be called Elementary Photography or Essential Photography, because this guy goes through photography. Bear in mind it's all analog photography. It's all based on film era but everything is in here, from the physics aspect, from the chemistry aspect, the composition and style of lenses, how they work, all the technical expressions you could ever want are in here, from nodal points. He covers the Western exposure range, just about everything you can think of with regard to the fundamental aspects of photography is covered in this book. He covers things like camera movements, so if you use a large format camera, particularly monorail like the one on the cover, everything you need to know about using one of those is in here. The different types of shutter mechanism and how they work. Everything through to how you should lay out your darkroom. You can make up your own developer and fixer just by going by this book. It's dirt cheap. It's available from charity shops or thrift stores, and various online auction sites for less than £5. And if you're into that kind of thing, if you actually still use film cameras and do your own processing, excellent book, take it from me. I've owned it since '74 and I would never ever sell it. That's boring part number 1 out of the way. Boring part number 2 is my funny story, and this actually goes back to 1974 as well, when I was managing what was then called Chester Camera Centre. It's now part of the London Camera Exchange, still in the same building. It's at Bridge Street Row in Chester, where I did a video a few weeks ago. And I used to commute from North Wales into Chester every day by train, and on this particular occasion my train had been delayed and I didn't get to the store until about 9:10, where I discovered that my assistant Dave had already opened up and was already speaking to a customer, which wasn't unusual, but it soon turned out to be anything but usual. Anyway, I went to the back, to the staff room, hung up my coats, took an interest in what was going on, and quite quickly realised that Dave had out on the counter in front of him the latest Olympus OM1, the MD version, which stood for Motor Drive, which had only come out that year. He had mounted onto it a 50mm 1.4 standard lens. He also had the 28mm f2 wide angle and the 135 f2 telephoto and the 75 to 150 zoom and a Motor Drive unit and an Olympus holdall. And he was going through these things, and the customer was looking through the camera and fiddling with the lenses and everything. And I started to look at this guy and realised that he was wearing an odd assortment of clothing. He had on a fairly trendy red anorak, and I think it was an STP badged anorak, you know, bright red and with the STP oval logo on the back. He had a pair of dinner jacket trousers, the ones with the shiny white stripe going down the outside of each leg, if you know what I mean. But instead of nice patent leather shoes, he had on a pair of old, what in those days we would have called plimsolls or pumps. This is before the advent of trainers, of course. And then beneath that, he had just a frilly-necked shirt. And he looked very unkempt. He had very dark shadows under his eyes. And I was just getting a little bit suspicious, partly because all this equipment totted up to goodness knows how much. I'll try and put a figure on screen for you now. I'll need to do some maths and conversion figures to work out how much it would be worth in today's money and how much it was back then. But it was a lot of money. And I was standing relatively close, but pretending to be doing some dusting or something. And there came a point after about half an hour where the customer said to Dave, "Okay, great, I'll take it." And Dave said, "What exactly would you like to take?" And the gentleman said, "Everything, please." And he produced from his wallet an Access credit card. Now, in 1974, Access had only just been launched, and Access was a competitor to the Visa credit card system, and it was operated by several banks as a direct competitor to the Visa credit card. It wasn't a problem. We were set up to accept either. But of course, in those days, this was long before chip and pin services. If a sale was more than, I think it was £50, if the sale was more than £50, we had to get an authorization code from either Visa or Access. And you had to do that by phoning them. So this is when I took a real interest in what was going on. And I said, I chipped in at this point and I said, "Okay, Dave, if you would like to start getting everything together for the gentleman, I will go and get the authorization code from Access while you're doing that." And the shop is still 2 floors, and the office was upstairs. And we had 2 phone lines up there, and one for sharing with the shop downstairs, and a second one for the bigwigs when they came to visit. So I went upstairs and I phoned Access, gave them our merchant number and gave them the card number and the amount of money. And as I was looking at the card and reading it out, I was realizing that I was getting more and more suspicious, because it was an Access card issued by the National Westminster Bank. The name on the front of the card was Westminster, and the signature on the back of the card was a W and then a squiggly line. And I thought to myself, "Oh my goodness, this smells a bit fishy." So I picked up the lady I was speaking to from Access said, "Just hold on one moment, sir, while I transfer you." And 9 times out of 10, whenever that happened, it meant that the card was either stolen, or that the customer was asking for an amount greater than their credit limit. Either way, I'd given up at that stage, and I picked up the other telephone and I dialed a local police station, and I said, "Hello, it's Alan here from Chester Camera Centre. I think we're in the middle of being defrauded out of a couple of £1,000 worth of camera equipment. Can you send somebody round urgently?" And the officer at the end of the line said, "Yes, okay, so I'll get somebody on it as soon as I can." Put that phone down, and without a word of a lie, as soon as I put my ear to this one, the lady from Access came back on and said, "Oh yes, here's your authorization code. The Duke's credit limit is perfectly okay." And it's one of those eureka moments when you realize just what a massive mistake you've made. Downstairs, purchasing a complete Olympus outfit was none other than the Duke of Westminster. Now, in 1974, I've checked this, in 1974 the Duke of Westminster was the 2nd richest person in the country. The only person with more wealth was Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, and I was about to get him arrested by a couple of local bobbies. You've never seen me move so fast in all your life. Dave and I packed up all those bits of equipment in the genuine bags. We gave him as many carrier bags as he needed, and I sort of shooed him out of the shop And without a word of a lie, he went out of our shop doorway, turned right on Chester Rose, went round the corner to the Grosvenor Hotel, which he just happens to own anyway. And as he went round the corner, these two bobbies came into the shop from the left-hand side. And I had to explain what I'd done. And I've never felt so embarrassed in all my life. It transpired that while I'd actually been upstairs on the telephone to Access, he'd told my colleague Dave exactly what had happened. He'd had a night out in the Grosvenor Hotel at some sort of function. Whether his friend Mr. David Bailey or Patrick Litchfield was at that same event or not, I don't know, but whatever, they had told him that he ought to buy himself an Olympus camera if he was going to get something serious, and that's why he'd come in to see us. He'd been staying just round the corner instead of his huge stately home a few miles away. He'd lost his shoes, and he'd borrowed one of the staff members' shoes and the jacket. Oh boy, that was a very close call. I hope you've enjoyed that amusing story. It's funny from my point of view anyway. I hope it's made you smile and hasn't put you off watching some of the other videos on the channel. But for now, until I get my new lens and manual adapter sorted out next week, I'm going to say take care of yourselves, enjoy your photography, have a smile, get out and about, and I'll see you again very soon. Bye for now.